ANA eLearning Academy is brought to you by CDN Graysheet, a trusted source of rare coin and currency valuations since 1963.
Thanks for joining us today at the ANA eLearning Academy. I'm Andy Dickus, and today is the first in a week-long series featuring Money Big and Bold. Happy National Coin Week, everyone, and thanks for joining us. The ANA would like to thank our e-learning partner, the Graysheet, for the support of the program. Today we have ANA Education Director Rod Gillis, who will be presenting on an interesting coin from the U.S. Classic Commemorative Series, the Lafayette Dollar. If you have any questions, post them in the chat board, and then I will read them to Rod when he's done presenting. You will be muted during this presentation. So without further ado, I would like to turn things over to my colleague and friend, Rod Gillis.
Thanks, Andy, and welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to meet with me. And I just want to start at the outset saying that I have an interest in commemorative coins, both the early and modern series. I am not an expert on the commemoratives. There are people who are. I'm not one of them, but I do follow them and have for many years and have learned a great deal. So the purpose for today is to be able to share some of that information with you. I may not be able to answer all of your questions, but I'll do my best. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Lafayette Dollar and why it sort of is has been forgotten. As Andy mentioned, you know, the theme for a National Coin Week is Money Big and Bold, and certainly the Lafayette Dollar is a large coin. As a matter of fact, I did a little bit of reading, and there was a proposal to actually make it larger than the standard size for silver dollars, but the Charles Barber said no, that was not a good idea because it would take even more force to be able to produce the dollars at the mint than the great amount of force it takes to produce silver dollars. So it certainly does qualify as a big coin. But I would say that unfortunately for the coin, it has sort of been forgotten. It is not nearly as popular as many of the commemorative half dollars, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that later on in the presentation. So I'll begin now. And there is an example of a Lafayette Dollar. This is a toned example of it, and as I mentioned, it's quite a large coin. There's even though it's quite large, there's a large field. The design is big, but the field is quite plentiful, which is interesting because a lot of commemoratives, you'll notice that the design is very busy, one in which they almost use up all of the space that is possible. And they didn't do that with the Lafayette Dollar. The purpose and authorization. The Lafayette Dollar was suggested to commemorate and fund a memorial equestrian statue to General Lafayette in Paris as part of the Paris Exposition of 1900. 50,000 pieces were the maximum number authorized at a sale price of $2 per coin. Now, there were a few more that were actually made as sort of as test pieces, but the official mintage for coins that could be sold were 50,000 at $2 a piece. And the Lafayette Memorial Commission was placed in charge of raising funds for the Paris statue. Let's first take a look at the Obverse Design. The Obverse was created by Chief Mint Engraver Charles Barber. It consists of conjoined heads of George Washington and Gilbert du Motier, Marquis de Lafayette. If I butcher some French names during the presentation, please bear with me. But both Lafayette and George Washington are facing right. The words Lafayette Dollar appear at the bottom of the coin. and the edge of the coin is reeded. Most likely, the inspiration for the Washington profile came from the bust of Jean-Antoine Houdin, and this is an example of his work. A depiction of this bust is found on the Washington before Boston medal by Pierre-Simon Benjamin Duvivier. Most likely, the inspiration for the Lafayette bust came from a medal minted in 1824 by Francois Augustin Conoy. Now, according to Anthony Swiatek, who is an expert on commemoratives, and Walter Breen, the design of the conjoined heads were taken from Peter Kreider's Yorktown Centennial Medal, minted in 1881, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Yorktown. And if you look at that medal, it does amazingly look like the obverse of the Lafayette Dollar. The reverse design. The reverse design is taken from the statue of General Lafayette mounted on a horse facing left. In his right hand, he is holding a sword with the blade facing down and the hilt up. Within the border, the inscription, erected by the youth of the United States in honor of General Lafayette, Paris, 1900. The name Bartlett appears below the statue. Paul Wayland Bartlett designed the statue. And, you know, it appears to me, looking especially on the reverse, that it is fairly low relief. I mean, if you look at the horse's mane and the horse's tail, they really don't jump out at you. But to me, the most significant part in low relief is the actual sword that Lafayette is holding. In March 1898, the Daughters of the American Revolution lobbied Congress to commission a monument to be placed in Paris on behalf of the United States as a reciprocal gift for the Statue of Liberty. The funding for the statue came from two sources. School children across the country were asked to donate cents during Lafayette Day events. A total of $45,858.30 was raised by this means, that's remarkable that much money was raised by school children who were donating cents. Now, what's interesting about that is that there is a precedent for that. In 1875 in Baltimore, there was a fund drive created by a school teacher in Baltimore called Pennies for Poe. And what she did is she was able to get schools within the city to have children donate pennies to move Edgar Allan Poe, who was in an unmarked grave, to and build a monument and move Poe next to his family members. So there is a precedent for doing things like that. The other source of funds came from the sale of the commemorative dollar coin. 50,000 silver dollar coins were authorized. The statue was to be delivered in time for the Paris Exposition Universelle of 1900. And here was a postcard that was made showing the massive land and buildings that were created for the Paris Exposition. And you can see in the background, there's a Ferris wheel. And I didn't look it up, and I should, but I recall reading that this Ferris wheel that was brought to Paris was the original Ferris wheel that was used at the Columbian Exposition. I believe that is the case. Well, there was more going on in Paris than just the Paris Exposition, and that was the 1900 Olympics. The 1900 Olympics were held in Paris under the framework of the fair. The competition began on May 14th and did not end until October 28th. Several events were held that were never held in future Olympiads, such as car and motorcycle racing, croquet, and kite flying. No opening or closing ceremonies were held. And here are two examples, two images that were taken. The one shows a race car as it's about to be part of the Olympic race car event. And on the right-hand side, you can see the building of kites for the kite flying event. Now, I don't know how the kite flying event was judged. I don't have that information, but I just find it interesting that that was an actual event during the 1900 Olympics. All Lafayette dollars were struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and I found this particularly interesting. They were minted all were minted on the same day, December 14th, 1899, which happened to be the 100th anniversary of the death of George Washington. And I'm sure that was done. That wasn't just coincidence. I'm sure that was done on purpose. The first coin minted was placed in a presentation chest and delivered to the French president, Émile Loubet. The chest cost $1,000 to build. And you can see on the right-hand side, this is the chest. I know it's not a terrific image of the chest. I would assume that in the two circles at the front of the chest, that would be Washington and Lafayette. That would be my assumption. But that was actually transported across the ocean and given to the French president, who thought very highly of it. As I mentioned, coins were sold at a price of $2 each. 12,000 of the original 50,000 coins were shipped to France for purchase. Unfortunately, the sales in France were disappointing, and after the fair closed, 10,000 of the 12,000 were shipped back to the United States. So my rudimentary math skills show me that only 2,000 were actually sold in Paris. In all, 14,000 of the 50,000 were returned to the mint for melting, resulting in a total mintage number of approximately 36,000. Die varieties. There are actual die varieties with the Lafayette dollar, and what I found out was that there were die varieties both on the obverse and reverse, although I would say that far and away people spend more attention on the reverse die varieties than they do on the obverse. There are 4 different obverse die varieties and 5 different reverse varieties. The obverse varieties involve positioning of letters and letters that were repunched, and the reverse die varieties involve the size and location of the leaves on the palm branch immediately below the statue. Most collectors do not seem that excited over the varieties, and that's true. I've had an opportunity to talk to people who own a Lafayette dollar, and some who are accomplished numismatists were unaware that there were several different varieties that took place. They knew that there were, that more than likely there were a couple of the presses that were making the coins, but they didn't know that there were several varieties. So I know this is hard to see, and I did my best to bring this forward. But what you see here are examples of the 4 reverse die varieties. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, that's all well and good, but I really can't get a good view of it. And so here's the book. Here's the information that you'll need. This is taken from the page of the Encyclopedia of the Commemorative Coins of the United States, and it is written by Anthony Swiatek. It's in a green dust jacket, and that book is available. So if you are, and of course it deals with not only the Lafayette dollar, but it deals with all the commemoratives of the classic commemorative series, both silver and gold. And if you are interested in the die varieties and getting some up-close images, this is the book for you. And there is also another page that deals with the obverse varieties. So if that's something that is important to you, that is the book that you'll want to get a hold of. And yes, we do have it. We have several copies of it in our library. So if that's something that you want to borrow from the library, that certainly is an option. Again, Encyclopedia of the Commemorative Coins of the United States by Anthony Swiatek. Here's a little bit of trivia from the Lafayette Dollar. With the creation of the Lafayette Memorial Dollar, George Washington became the first president to appear on a United States coin. You got to be careful with that, because if the question is, who is the first president to appear on a business strike or regularly circulated coin? Of course, the answer would be Abraham Lincoln with the 1909 cent. But if you're just saying that the first president to appear on a United States coin, it is indeed George Washington, and it's on the Lafayette Dollar. Lafayette was the first person to appear on both the obverse and reverse of a United States coin. And all Lafayette dollars are minted on the same day, December 14th, 1899, the 100th anniversary of the death of President Washington. Here's what's interesting. The date on the coin is 1900, but that date signifies the date of the statue, not of the coin, making the coin technically dateless, which means it is illegal. Now, if they wanted to put the correct date on the coin, it would, of course, be 1899, because that's when the coin was minted. And most people assume that the 1900 date signifies that that is the date that is supposed to be on the coin, but not technically. Interesting. All right. Why is the Lafayette dollar forgotten? Well, tradition has it that the dollars were struck on an old Merrick press that had been used to punch out medals at state fairs. This may not be true, because several dies were used and the Merrick press was working at capacity, so a second press may have been used. As a matter of fact, I think it's very likely that a couple of different presses were used, simply because since there are varieties, that means that there have to have been several dies, and to change the dies in the old Merrick press and still be able to produce the amount of coins that were minted in one day would be very hard to do. The Merrick press was able to produce about 80 coins per minute, and that it was at its capacity. What's interesting, unlike most other commemorative coins, the coins were minted just like business strikes and were not specially handled. So when they come out of the minting press and land into the hopper, they're warm and malleable, which means that there's a good opportunity, since they're such big coins, that they're going to hit other coins as they're ejected and leave marks, leave bag marks. So that's not a good thing. And also, it's just in general, because the coins are such low relief, they really don't appear very lustrous. I'm not prepared to say that they're not an attractive coin, but I don't think that it was the mint's best efforts. And unfortunately today, most Lafayette dollars that you run across are either problem coins and that they've been cleaned, or there's wear, they've actually been circulated, or they've been hit so many times because they're such a large coin and there's so much open field. I've mentioned the low relief. Many have been mishandled. The other thing is, it's the only dollar denomination of the classic series. Now, the only other coin that was minted that is not part of the $half series is the Isabella quarter. So it's sort of an odd duck out there. One thing I learned a long time ago is that when you're looking at the eye appeal of a coin, and of course, eye appeal is very subjective, that luster, strength of strike, and the detractors that are found, by that I mean marks and scratches, equal eye appeal. So if we look at this coin objectively, it's very hard to find a tremendous amount of luster because of its low relief. The strength of strike, if you remember, I mentioned on the reverse that the low relief, the strike of the sword is very faint. And we also talked about, since the coins were not handled specifically as commemorative coins are often handled, that there was a chance for hits, bag marks, and scratches to appear. So that's basically what I have for you concerning the Lafayette dollar and my thoughts about it. I like the coin, but I will say that many examples that I've seen are not very handsome. One of the things that I also wanted to mention is that You need to be, if you don't have one and you're looking to own one, you need to be very careful because there are a significant amount of counterfeits for Lafayette dollars out there. And my best advice for you, if you're worried about whether a Lafayette dollar that you're thinking about buying is counterfeit or not, you need to pay special attention to the lettering, the font of the lettering and the spacing, because it seems to me that that's where the counterfeiters have a hard time accurately duplicating the originals, in that the font and the spacing on the obverse especially is not quite right. Okay, Andy, I'm ready to take some questions that some people may have if they want to ask.
All right. So there's a couple of questions.
Sure.
Well, first of all, we have someone agreeing that it was kind of a copycat of the Yorktown medal in 1881.
Mm-hmm.
There are also some other questions here.
Okay.
Has there been another double head obverse design of this coin?
Another, I'm wondering if that person means as there's been a double-headed obverse of commemorative coins. I guess that's what they're trying to ask, but I'm not sure. And if that's what they're trying to ask, the answer is yes. There are several examples of commemorative coins with conjoined heads. The sesquicentennial has George Washington and Calvin Coolidge. There's also the Huguenot, which has conjoined heads as well. So yeah, that was a very popular design during the classic commemorative time period.
Yeah, some other attendees here, Rod, are mentioning the Arkansas commemorative, the Maryland tercentenary, the sesquicentennial half, and other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things in particular that the sesquicentennial had in besides just the design was that's another coin that was very low relief, and it's extremely difficult to find. While sesquicentennials are a common coin, they made quite a few of them. It's not easy to find one that is very lustrous, and if you do find one that is a nice strike and is very lustrous, that's a coin that you definitely want to hold on to because you just don't see many like that.
Here's an interesting question, Rod. Both men were prominent Freemasons. Do you know of any connection there with the minting?
Well, that's a great question, and I did know that they were Freemasons. I don't think that their Masonry is what brought them together. I mean, they were fast friends, and as a matter of fact, Washington welcomed Lafayette to his home in Mount Vernon, and years later, Lafayette came back and visited, and so they were very good friends. They may well have talked about Masonry, but I think I would say that their friendship and the fact that they were so involved in the Revolutionary War together, and because Washington just thought so very highly of Lafayette, I think those were the main reasons that they were joined together, not necessarily because of Masonry.
Here's actually not a question, but an interesting comment, Rod. I didn't know about this. The Paris wheel was called the Gigantic Wheel, built by Walter Bassett from England. And that same Ferris wheel was used again in St. Louis in 1904.
That's where I was thinking about, and he's absolutely right. That's true. And it was used in St. Louis, and I'm mistaken about the Colombian one. Yeah, the Ferris wheels, well, the original one that was at the Columbian Exposition and the one that was in St. Louis were just gigantic, much larger than we are used to today when we think of Ferris wheels. As a matter of fact, I remember reading that the one in the Columbian, the original one by Ferris, that one of the cars was actually occupied by a band. And when the wheel started to turn, that the band would strike up tunes and play tunes. So the cars, we're used to being in a Ferris wheel where the cars are just room enough for two, maybe three people top. But these cars were just ginormous in the amount of people that could carry them. And so much larger than what we would think of today.
Here's a question about a die variety, Rod.
Yeah.
I own a Duval 3D, which is the rarest variety. Is there a premium associated with that variety?
My answer would be probably yes. But the problem is that there's a very select few of people who would realize what you have and would be in the market of collecting it. And the reason I say that, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I know someone who, I know several people, not just one. I know several people who are very involved in commemoratives who really just are not aware of the differences in the die varieties and what they represent. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I read that in 1988, there was another reverse variety that was discovered. And the reverse variety that was discovered happened to be on the rarest of varieties of the obverse, and that there are only one or two examples of that. So while the attendee, I'm sure, does have a very rare example, I think the ones that were actually discovered in 1988, with them only being one or two examples, probably are the rarest. And you might say, well, where did the rest of them go? Well, the rest of them could very well have been made up of the 14,000 that were melted at the mint. But so to get back to your question, I would say yes, you do have something that will increase in value and that is especially valuable, but that the number of collectors who are looking for that or are even aware of that type of variety are very select. And that if you were ever in the market for selling that, it would be a little bit of a job being able to find those particular people who are looking for that particular coin.
All right, another question, Rod. Have classic commemorative coins purposefully been made with low reliefs?
So, excuse me. So no, there are examples of commemorative coins in the classic series that are not, I would say, low in relief. There are some that are that can be very lustrous. Let me see if I can come up with an example. The Texas coin has a lot of, it's a very busy design and has a pretty high relief. I would also say that the coin that has the Roanoke. The Roanoke is another example of a pretty lustrous coin that has a fairly high strike. When you're talking about the commemorative coin series, the year where they were busiest was 1936. They were just coming out, a whole ton of commemoratives were coming out. And so they had very little time to be able to devote to making the coins as handsome as they hoped. But I would say it would be a mistake to say that all of the or even most of the commemoratives were low relief. When I think of a low relief commemorative, again, the poster child for me is the sesquicentennial. There are others, but that's the one that jumps out at me. And I would say that there are several coins that the Grant is another example that has a fairly high relief. So no, they're out there. They're out there.
All right, here's a question. I can think of one coin, but has anyone else been on the obverse and reverse of a U.S. coin?
Well, Abraham Lincoln has.
That was my one.
Yeah, with the memorial cent. He appears on the obverse and reverse. And I'm trying to
any other any George Washington coins? I'm trying to think.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that George Washington appears on the obverse and reverse. And I'm trying to think of anyone else that comes to mind.
Oh, an attendee has a good one. The Daniel Boone evidently has Daniel Boone on both sides.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's a good point. That's a good point about Daniel Boone.
The Lewis and Clark $1 gold.
The Lewis and Clark gold. Yeah. The neat thing about the Boone is, here's another piece of trivia, and Andy, you and I have talked about this. On the Boone, he is on the reverse with a Native American, and what is his name? But the Native American adopted Daniel Boone as his son.
Yes.
So that's an example of a coin where you actually have a father and son appear on a United States coin. Now he wasn't a blood son. He was because he was adopted. But yeah, that's a really neat trivia question that you can have there's an example on the reverse where it is a father and son. Daniel Boone.
Our attendees here, Rod, are just showering us with examples of coins with people on both sides. So I encourage everybody to check the chat out. There's quite a few.
Are any of them George Washington? Because for the life of me, I can't think of George being on the obverse and reverse.
Okay, Rod, this is an interesting question. Early commemoratives include the quarter, half dollar, silver dollar, gold dollar, quarter eagle, and $50 gold. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on how the half dollar ended up beginning the major commemorative denomination?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it had to do with price. That's my thought. Initially, the first two commemoratives that came out are the half dollar, the Colombian half dollar, and the Isabella quarter. As a matter of fact, the Colombian comes out first because the originals come out in 1892. And throughout the commemorative series, there was always legislation about, well, let's make these a dollar coin. Let's not make these half dollars. But especially as you got into the later years, there were so many commemorative coins that were being minted that people were just very choosy about where they were going to spend their hard-earned dollars. And so I think that one of the reasons, may not be the only reason, but one of the reasons that the half dollar was the go-to denomination is to help keep the prices down. You got to remember that when you're talking about $2 for a coin in 1900, that's a lot of money for people. And that was, at that point, that happened to be, in the silver series, that happened to be the most expensive. And it was sort of like, geez, do I want to spend $2 for something that I probably won't be able to spend? Now, commemorative coins are all legal tender and you can spend them. And as a matter of fact, when times got tough, there were several Lafayette dollars that were put into circulation. But my initial reaction to that is I think that the half dollar was a go-to because that it would help keep costs down.
Rod, can you find a third-party grading service slabbed Lafayette dollar easily?
Yes, you can, but you're going to have a tough time finding one that's not listed as cleaned. The vast majority of Lafayette dollars that I have encountered have come back in details, sadly. They far outweigh the ones that have been straight graded. So yes, I have seen examples of I've not seen an ICG. I'm sure there is one. I've not seen an ICG Lafayette dollar, but I certainly have seen ANAX Lafayette dollars. I have seen PCGS Lafayette dollars, and I have seen NGC Lafayette dollars. So yeah, they're out there, and there are some that you will find that straight grade, but their prices are fairly high, only because so many come back as being cleaned.
Here's a very important question, Rod, from a young numismatist.
Sure.
How many YN dollars is watching this presentation worth?
Because it's me next to zero. Actually, that's a good question, and you need to contact Sam Gelbert. Sam can tell you how many they're worth. I think there's a standard amount for each presentation, and either that's listed on our website, or I'm sure that Sam has the answer. So you'll want to talk to Sam about that. But yes, you can earn YN dollars even when I'm the person who you're listening to.
How many coins were struck as commemorative coins based on circulated coins?
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Such as the American Indian head nickel or the American Indian head dollar.
Yeah. So there are far more coins or business strikes have been minted more so than commemorative coins. And if you look at the mintage number of commemorative coins, you might say to yourself, well, I don't understand why they aren't worth more than they are. Because if you equated that number with the number of, let's say, Morgan dollars of a particular year, those coins would be astronomical. And if you said that to yourself, you would be right. And the reason is demand. There is a select group. I don't want to say that they're tiny, but there is a select group of people who collect commemorative coins. And so when you're talking about the coins that have very low mintage numbers, for example, the Hawaii coin, which I think they minted 10,000, something like that. I mean, there's only so many that can go around. And so when you get to the point where you're looking to purchase one of those, you're going to have to spend a lot of money because they just don't come up that often, since there was only 10,000 of them or so. There are some examples of commemoratives where they did make a lot of them. The Washington Carver $50, the Booker T. Washington $50, they made quite a few of those. The Oregon Trail, they made quite a few over several years. So those commemoratives can be had for not nearly as much money. But the other thing that you've always got to remember is that when we're talking about the number of coins, the number of commemorative coins that were minted, you also have to figure in how many were returned back to the mint for melting. And what you're going to find is that for many coins, for many commemoratives, there were a significant amount of coins that were melted, as opposed to the ones that actually stayed out there. As a matter of fact, I think that there are several examples of coins where more were melted than actually were sold in circulation. And again, I've done this several times, and I don't mean to harp on this, but when you go back to 1936, where there were just many commemoratives minted, people just got tired of that. It's like, oh my goodness, another one. We just one came out just last week, and it got to the point where sort of the bloom fell off the rose.
Here, I know you covered this a little bit, Rod, in your presentation,
Mhm.
But someone is asking, just because of Lafayette's stature, as in France and the United States, as basically a national hero in both countries. There was little interest in the coin, and you've mentioned a lot of reasons why. But this question deals with, was the $2 price on the coin, was that probably a bit too high? Was that a contributing factor?
So I think that was one of the contributing factors for why they weren't nearly as popular. Why they weren't popular in Paris, I tend to think it's because people just weren't interested in United States coins, and the people in Paris, just felt that it was not worth their time to have a United States coin. Now, what's interesting about the statue itself is that the statue that was built for the one that's in Paris, there's also a smaller version that is in the United States. I want to say it's in Massachusetts, but I could be wrong. But what's interesting about that particular statue is that there is a turtle that is also next to one of the horse's hooves. And that was done on purpose because the turtle was a comment by the sculptor that it had taken so long to be able to create this statue that time just sort of dragged on and on and on because he wasn't getting paid. And that's why he created it. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that there was not that many years ago, school children were invited to come up with a name for the turtle that appears on the United States version of the Lafayette statue. But to get back to what we were saying, the other thing is, because the Lafayette dollar was minted in 1899 for sale in 1900, that was also very early on in the commemorative series. And, so there was, people may have thought that, this is not going to be part of a long extended series, that this is just something that has come out, and why bother with it? It's easy for us to look back today, and for those of us who want to complete the series, say, oh, I've got to get a Lafayette dollar, because if I don't, then my my commemorative collection, my classic commemorative collection, is not complete. So, we would look for that particular coin. But if you put yourself in that time period in 1900, when that coin comes out, it may not just have been that big a deal. And, when you think about it, that the mint themselves really didn't treat the coin that specially. They brought out a really old, worn press to at least mint some of the coins, and they didn't handle the coins that well after they were ejected out of the press. All these things lead me to believe that they really weren't considered that special at the time that they were minted, regrettably.
Rod, how big of an issue is counterfeiting with this coin? Is it better to go with graded, even if it says it comes back, or it says cleaned? Can you?
So that's a really good question, and my answer is I don't think. Are there examples of Lafayette dollars that are out there that it's very hard to tell the difference between a authentic one and a counterfeit? I would suppose so. The vast majority of counterfeit Lafayette dollars that I've run across are very easy to tell. And when we're teaching grading classes, for example, we always tell people, know your series. So I think that if you read up on the Lafayette dollars and become very familiar with the design, I think that goes a long way in guarding yourself against purchasing one that is not authentic. I think that the vast majority of people who buy the counterfeits are not as well learned on the Lafayette dollar as they should be. If you're just, if you're not trusting your skills, then obviously, yes, buying one that is that has been graded by the third-party grading company, even if it's been graded clean, is a safer way to go. And if you don't mind that coin being cleaned, and believe me, the vast majority of them have been abused in some way or another. If you don't mind having one that has been cleaned, then so much the better. To me personally, there are cleanings and there are cleanings. I mean, I've dealt with commemorative coins that I've looked at them and I said, it probably was cleaned once and a very long time ago. That part doesn't bother me specifically at all. And then there are coins that you can look at that just look bright and shiny. You can say, oh my goodness, someone whizzed that. And that bothers me much more. So it really depends on what you're willing to tolerate. If you're willing to tolerate a very mild cleaning that you have to look very hard for to be able to notice it, and it really doesn't bother you, then that's wonderful.
Here's just kind of an interesting comment going along with maybe the lack of success for the coin. Perhaps the French people who funded the Statue of Liberty found it off-putting that Americans were trying to fund a tribute to Lafayette with French funds rather than U.S. I guess I didn't know about that.
Let's see. I'm a little unsure what he means about funding it with French funds. Because
I didn't know anything about it either. Someone commented here that the tribute to Lafayette, the statue. Oh, selling coins. Oh, just selling coins to French people.
Oh,
I guess that's what it means. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. I think that that just because they were minted in the United States, that they were, and then you could say, well, maybe if they only had Lafayette on it and not George Washington, maybe they would have been more popular. It's hard to say. My premise is that they just weren't. This was very early along in the commemorative series, and they just weren't. They just weren't thought of being that special as we would later on in the series, when it was obvious that you would be able to put a collection of commemorative coins together. I think in 1900, the idea that commemorative coins were going to be out there and you were going to be able to form a collection of them, I don't think that a lot of people realized that was going to happen.
Okay, everyone, we're going to wrap up the questions now. If you look on the chat, I posted a link to Rod's page that he put together on all of the coins in the U.S. Classic Commemorative series. And it's very informative. It's also very entertaining. You get to learn a lot of stuff about coins and even just kind of what was going on when these coins were produced. So I invite you to check that out if you're interested in classic U.S. commemoratives.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And the nice part about that page is if you happen to be a fan of toning, the coins that the vast majority of the coins that you will see there, and you can blow the images up to it's almost they fill your entire screen, so you can look at them very carefully. I think that if you're a fan of toning, that you will be very pleased with the coins that you see, because they're very beautiful.
Well, thank you, Rod. I learned some things this evening. I hope everybody else did too. Certainly a very interesting coin. Yeah, thank you for that great presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Andy. And again, thanks to everyone who took time out of their busy schedule to be able to spend a little bit of time with me. I greatly appreciate it.
Everyone, thanks to Rod. Thanks to all of you for logging in. And thanks again to the Gray Sheet for their partnership, their sponsorship for the eLearning Academy. I'm going to do just do a plug right now. If you are not an ANA member, we do have something going on this week, all throughout National Coin Week. So this Saturday, where a digital gold membership to the ANA is only $5, and that'll get you digital access to the Numismatist, our monthly magazine, and a variety of other benefits as well. So I just wanted to make everybody, along with that, go on to money.org for more details. Thank you for, again, joining us this evening. And we're going to have presentations all week regarding our National Coin Week theme, Money Big and Bold. So please join us all week for all the other presentations. And again, we thank you for stopping by.